This is one of the most important questions I think that you have to ask if you are an agency or if you're a business owner is like, what's the metric that I care about the most? And then start from there. Like, what's my big goal and what's the metric that I care about the most in order to get to that goal? And most of the time for us, it's profit per new customer acquired. Hello and welcome to the Perpetual Traffic podcast.
The show where we talk about how to grow and scale your business, and not the show where we are going to neglect co-host birthday. Happy birthday, Ralph!
Oh, wow. It's yes, I am Ralph Burns, founder of Tier 11, and yes, today is my birthday.
And I am Lauren E. Petrullo, founder of Mongoose Media, and it is my unbirthday, my very merry unbirthday.
Your non-birthday. Well, we'd love for you to come hang out with us over at our new Telegram group. It's actually not new right now. It's actually been around for quite some time. I don't even know how many members are in there. I haven't checked it today, but that's over at perpetualtraffic.com/Telegram. We actually continued the conversation on what we talk about here inside the show and a lot of other conversations. And there's a lot of people in there that are taking a really active role, which I super appreciate. We should actually do shout outs for them maybe on the next show. Yeah, Tarek, especially. Like, that guy is like, he's like our own moderator. We don't even pay him. He's probably going to want pay now that he hears the show. But the point is that I really appreciate everybody who's going in there and giving up their knowledge and expertise. And it's not all about us, but it's a nice little community that we've evolved into over on Telegram. And definitely join perpetualtraffic.com/Telegram. None of this crap about birthdays. I don't want to talk about my birthday anymore, but I do know that my kids are going to give me like some really good gifts, apparently. And Jen always comes up with something that's super cool. You are not in your normal spot in Orlando. Where are you in the world today, Lauren E. Petrullo?
I'm in New York City, which would have been a great place to throw your birthday party.
It would have.
Would have been, and you're only like an hour away. I was so close, so close. But yeah, I'm in the Big Apple. In Manhattan, having a blast. I'm here for a mastermind. Yeah. So alongside some really brilliant faces, some awesome guests that have been on PT, and now I've stepped out to the side to come hang out with my favorite birthday boy.
Well, appreciate that. And who's hosting the mastermind? Let's give him a plug, just for old time's sake.
Sure.
Because I never joined his mastermind. He's probably still pissed at me.
he got the taller co-host of the podcast then. Because you don't wear big shoes. It's 100% the reason you're not.
Well, I don't hit the height requirements, although I am taller than Ollie. I will say that.
Fair.
I have proof of that. Me standing next to him side by side.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just say this. It's a very tall mastermind group of people. I'm like next to Jeff, next to Chris Mercer. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Then everyone here makes me look short. And I'm in like 5-inch heels.
5-inch heels. Well, it's a requirement apparently for the mastermind. Yeah. Ollie's mastermind, which... What's the name of it? We'll give it a plug.
Next level scale.
Next level scale. I think it used to be just next level, and then it got like sued or something like that. It's like that's not cool. No, but it's a great mastermind. There's a lot of super smart people that are in there. You also do some stuff for M3, correct?
Yeah, correct. So next week, you'll see me in Austin with Mercer again, who's just in all the you're in another mastermind with him as well?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, you're in Driven with him. I'm a coach at M3. Mercer's just doing his profit school, and the business is working with him networking.
I actually don't know what Mercer does. Like, I know what he does because he's the most important person in digital marketing. The most important name in digital marketing, I believe, is Qasim once dubbed him. But I don't know what he actually does, aside from talk about measurement and go to masterminds. That's pretty much it. Yeah. And he lurks on all our Driven calls. And then, of course, when I see him, I give him endless amounts of crap. But anyway, so his stuff is, in all seriousness, he's the most canceled guest ever on Perpetual Traffic. We canceled him more times to get him on the show for the first time. Like, it set the record. It was like 7 or 8 times. I think on the 8th time we actually got him on the show. So I'm going to leave links back to that show just because his stuff is so dialed in, and he does a lot on measurement. I think he would actually appreciate today's episode here today, which transitioning over to that is that we're going to be talking about measurement and metrics and some of the newer metrics, ways in which we're looking at how to measure your digital marketing. It's not through traditional means. And what KPIs, how do you measure things? How do you sort of change the way to view the data that's coming at you? And there's a lot of data that comes at you, especially if you've got multiple apps that you're running ads on. You obviously, you have like your back end, your CRM. You might have a third-party attribution software. There's a lot of things that are coming at you all the time. How you sort of sift through it and make sense of it. And this is actually a question. I'm doing a week-long, sort of subject matter expert, ask the expert anything for 1,000 CEOs in this group. And one of their biggest questions is this question. So that's the reason why we're talking about it here today, is like, what are the metrics you prioritize to ensure the effectiveness and the efficiency of the spend that we do? So if you add up all of our ad spend, we do probably about 100 million on our side. John Moran brought over, with his expertise, another 100 million. Like, we're spending a lot of money right now. But like, when you spend that much, how much, like, what do you look at? Like, what's the thing you look at the most? Is it one metric? Is it multiple metrics? And I think there's a lot of confusion with this. We talked to John about this just a bit in the show that we did a couple of weeks ago, but also he'll be coming on a regular basis because this is a new way in which we see digital marketing going, and you need the tools to be able to do it. I think no matter what you do in order to how to measure, it's never going to be 100%. And even Chris Mercer, if he shows up in the background there, will say the same thing. It's like, it's 100%. Like, oh, you thought he was like over your shoulder. It's like,
is he over there?
You're never going to get it 100%. But at the most important metric, at least from my standpoint, is profit and loss as a business owner. I want to know what I'm spending, how much am I making, and hopefully I'm making more than what I'm spending. And what I look at is a very different metric than a lot of people look at. I look at our total marketing budget as in like all of our people together in marketing as part of my marketing spend.
Wait, you're counting marketing ops in your marketing spend?
I do.
Oh my gosh.
In our internal MER. So our MER, our marketing efficiency ratio is different, but I think it's a harder line metric because, we have I wouldn't say like a large team. We really have like a 3 or 4 person team. The point is that you can look at this, you can slice and dice this a lot of different ways. But at the end of the day, for me, it's the call I had yesterday with my CEO is like, what's the health of the business? What's my profitability? And I think where we're finding is that when we're talking, we'll get into this more, when we're talking to a lot of our newer clients about this, like, what is it that's most important? Like, what do you really want? Well, I want to grow and scale. Well, growing and scaling is easy. Like, I can spend $1 million a month and grow and scale, but like, that doesn't necessarily mean it's profitable. You want profitable growth and scale. And like, oh yeah, of course, which typically means for us, a huge emphasis on new customer acquisition, or a term that John has used multiple times since he's been on the show, is NCAC. And it's not well understood, nor is it well measured in the apps. And you almost have to go outside of the apps and even into the back end, your Shopify store, your CRM, third-party data sources, Northbeam, Wicked Reports, whatever it is that you use in order to measure these sorts of things. So these are the things that we're shifting more towards. And it's like turning a battleship right now going because a lot of people are resisting it. It's not like we're in
Yeah.
our little speedboat. We're like, all right, hey, now we're going to not measure ROAS anymore. We're going to go to MER and we're going to go to NCAC and we're going to go to, all these
lifetime
other
value. That's going to be
lifetime
important.
value.
It's like your performance marketing has become brand marketing.
It's become a very different thing. So we wrote a post about this a week or so ago. Tom was our VP of marketing, I think, doing an excellent job on this, but this is sort of the subject of today's conversation. We'll leave a link in the show notes for that post as well. So I guess to begin with, we've sort of hinted at some of the things that we want to talk about here today, but like from a base level, when you have a customer, like what are they looking for? And I mean, I know you've got like lots of different industries, lots of different types of customers. Like, what do they care about? Like, because they're not just hiring you. They're like, hey, I woke up this morning, I wanted to hire an agency. Like, they hire an agency to produce a result. And the agency is a means to an end. So what is it that you're finding so that you can say, all right, we did good work this week? Like, how do you explain that to your clients and your customers?
Fair. So, well, right now, what a lot of people are coming to us specifically and saying is we want new leads, we want more leads, but most importantly, we want new quality leads. And I think a lot of individuals know as they're this shift of the battleship towards brand versus traditional performance marketing, which I would argue is almost where you're saying like the traditional way of thinking of it was revolution. And now we have to actually go back to an almost prehistoric version of traditional, like back in the Mad Men, billboard, TV, that type of style of marketing for measurement. But I know a lot of customers that come to Mongoose Media are looking for more leads that are like hyper quality so that their sales team can close and acquire those customers. And a lot of the numbers that we'll present of how we measure success by can change depending on what systems and team members they have, as well as what budget they're spending. Because when you're a smaller ad account, you're going to default look into the in-app numbers because that's what you're used to. It's an easier vantage point. But I will say for the brands that are getting to, $10,000+ a day of ad spend, they're not looking at in-app for anything other than in a metric of hookiness, what's the sticky rate? What is the velocity of improved performance? That's what they're looking at for the in-apps. And then they're gut checking what in-app is saying against their bank accounts, their CRM, what we're talking to with their CFO team, with their other agency partners that are fulfilling on other sides. But yeah, I would agree with everything that you're saying, that the conversation is definitely shifting. And I see that shift so much stronger from the higher ad spend accounts leading the way, where it's this like trailing off archaic model of Facebook is telling me I have great ROAS, but my bank account said a different story.
Right.
Hence, you're looking at the revenue side.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I've used this example before. It's a newer customer of ours, and the agency said, we're crushing it for you. We've got 300% ROAS on Facebook this week and 600% ROAS this week on Google, and everything is great. And the customer said, everything is not great. I lost money last week more than I did the week before, and then more than I did the week before that, and every week for the last month. And 300% ROAS looks great. And it's not necessarily that I think in the case of that agency, they were trying to be deceptive, although I think some do use those in-app metrics to just make themselves look good and say, hey, look at what we're doing.
Justification KPIs.
Justification KPIs. I love that. That's a great word for it. Because they either do it because they know that they're producing some sort of ledger domain here, like some sort of sleight of hand, or they just don't know any other way to measure it. But at the end of the day, you've always got to look at like, what's your source of truth? And you said it.
Yeah.
It's your bank accounts, your CRM, it's your new customer account, it's your new customer count. It's if your clients are saying now, I want more leads, but I want greater quality, what do they really want? Like those are leading indicators. They want more sales for their salespeople to close and do it in a way so that it's profitable. It hits their profit margin metrics. It hits their KPI, whatever that happens to be, whatever their goal is. And I'm going to leave a video here of like the purpose of business, which is one of our more popular videos on tier 11, which is purpose of business ultimately is, yes, to do something good, have a product or service that has some sort of positive effect on the world. I get it. But at the end of the day, if you're not profitable, you can't achieve that vision. So the purpose of business is, in fact, profit. So I'll leave a link to that because that could be its own sort of show unto itself. But the point is that I think businesses now are not necessarily just relying on a single source of truth or just the in-app metrics, unless they're super small, super local, and that's all they run. And I think we started that way and we've sort of evolved that way, but now we still have some folks, I wouldn't say like all of them, but like, with John Moran as our lead on this, it's like, this is a tough sale, not only to clients, previous clients, but also training this to our new staff and turning around like what we think is like a better way of doing things because it's really complicated.
It definitely can get complicated because you have this like easy system that gives you the answers. So to seek out additional access, it's additional checking and monitoring. And let's be real, when you're spending so much time creating and innovating ideas, ad copy, ad strategy, checking one more spot, like I'm just going to be transparent. I've seen the conversations go where, oh, someone else should do that. That's not within my wheelhouse. I'm living only on this platform, so I'm going to manage only and by this platform. So it's definitely a change management that is coming. And at least I can say this is true for like our larger clients, our brands that are, 9 figures and above. They are steering the ship as fast as they possibly can in that direction. Because you talked about like so you look at like revenue as like one of the strongest KPIs. I actually will look at cash collected and understand what their burn rate is. Because if you're not profitable, you have to be funded. And if you're not profitable out the gate, if there is no funding or no area like landscape for burn rate, then like you said, you just created a business to help ensure future individuals to have to go on job interviews.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why there isn't a one size fits all here. I mean, I'm talking about like just at a base level, like, more revenue, but profitable revenue. Like really at the end of the day, it's like understanding cost of goods sold, understanding general administrative, understanding what they're sort of keeping after all of the spend is done and how they're able to do that over time. And how does a new customer being acquired enter into that fray? And how long does it take for that new customer to come in? And then how long do they stay? And what's their lifetime value? So there's two sides to that coin there, but I think they're all sort of the same. But you do have a case where, and we don't have any clients like this right now that are specifically venture funded. I see exactly what you're saying. It's like, you need to know, like, what's your burn rate? Like this is as best as you're going to do. You might lose $10,000 a month, $20,000 a month to get your brand out there before you start really being able to dial in your sales funnels. Like you do a lot of like sales funnel building, like almost product launch, like productization. And that is a different animal. Like if you have, I have $1 million in cash, but I'm losing $100,000 a month in my business. Well, do the math. It's pretty simple. Like you basically got 10 months there, buddy, before you run out of cash. So you need to be mindful of those sorts of things. So there's different circumstances in every specific case. In most cases for us, we're taking over or we're not launching brand new businesses into the market. It's typically it's folks that have, worked with maybe with other agencies in the past, or they have an internal team and they're looking finally for some outside help to get like to that next stage.
Sure.
And we're looking at really profitability at the end of the day. And, are you making more profit this week? Are you making more cash? Are you accumulating more cash this week than you were last week? And that's a harder thing to decipher because it's so easy to go in app and say, hey, I got 312% ROAS on, all your campaigns this week. And that can be a misleading metric for so many different reasons.
So I'll push to this like the cash stuff, because like one, I mean, you talked about how I think it's really important. I don't want to like lose this, where you're putting in your marketing operation costs in your MER, where I would argue like there's performance MER and then brand MER, which fine, you can calculate marketing operating expenses, but like when we do our MER, it's specifically marketing costs that are not managed. It's not human capital. It's ad spend, it's printing costs, it's that actual spend on marketing investments, not the labor behind it. So I want to go deeper into that for sure, because when you brought that up was huge. But I do want to like argue on the one misleading metric that we had to switch from a revenue to a cash collected element, because we do work with a lot of high ticket funnel offers, a lot of high ticket service providers that have a in-person element. So if there's like a physical location, there's a meetup, there is a seminar, there's some physicality to it. What we have found is when we only looked at revenue, the cancellation rate, the refund rate, the failed payment rate ended up giving us false understandings of what the number is, because the eventual money that was coming in wasn't actually being accrued because of numerous reasons. But when we started looking at the cash collected, especially with the in-person kind of component, you're not seeing as consistent of numbers, or we're like, okay, your revenue is growing in this way. You might see like bigger spurses of cash, which then allows us to look at a bigger picture, versus when we were looking at revenue, it felt like it became trend worthy. And when we were looking at cash, it helped us shift that conversation to what is your burn rate? How soon do you need to make this profitable? And then like, when does lifetime value kick in? What is our average order value? And helping create numbers that, I don't know if there's actually a universal term for how you should calculate lifetime value. Maybe there is. I don't know. Is there? How do you calculate lifetime value?
I think, well, I mean, I think lifetime value is, we look at it on like, I'll just tell you like how we do it and how we advise our clients on how to do it. And we look at like, what's the average life cycle of a client for you right now? So it might be a supplement company. How long do they stay on your, on your pre-workout? Well, they stay on for an average between 3 to 6 months. All right. So let's pick 4.5 months. So, and they usually will know that. Like that's the metric that they know. And all right, well, what's the average order value for customers, new customers, and then returning customers, and then figure those metrics out. So you've got, average order value on your first purchase, and then you've got average order value on your secondary purchases, which is basically purchase 2, 3, and let's say 4 instead of saying 4.5. So I'm thinking of one right now. It's like basically it's 4. So sort of take that aside. So, and we figure that out. We basically say, all right, I'll look at all your customers from last year and how much did they spend? How much did they actually spend on your products? And can you even figure out like on your new customers in the last 6 months, how many of those came in and how much did they spend? And if you're an e-commerce brand, this is pretty darn easy to do in the back end of Shopify. These are kind of basic numbers in a lot of ways. And in the video that I'll leave for everyone, one of the easiest ways to do it is just, if you don't know these numbers, just sort of take a guess. Like if you've been in business for any number of years, just take a guess. Like I know like off the top of my head, basically what our lifetime value of a customer is. I take the longer customers, I take the shorter term customers, and I sort of take the average of that. And I know what our profitability is per customer. So I basically know, like, all right, we can pay X amount of dollars for a customer because we know what their lifetime value is going to be and what their lifetime profit is going to be. So, and when I figure out the cost to acquire that customer, unlike a lot of folks that just use marketing spend, because we don't spend a whole lot on ads as of right now, I use our cost to acquire a customer as like our marketing department is part of that cost.
Amazing.
As well. So,
but that's for you or for your clients or both?
That's what we do. But a lot of times when we're trying to figure these sorts of things out with our clients, they're like, well, I need to factor your guys' fee into this. And we're like, absolutely, you should, because we're part of the marketing expense. You know, you've got your advertising expense. They might have maybe one person, maybe they have a director of marketing, maybe they have staff. Like, you know, we ask them, all right, well, what calculation do you want us to use here? How inclusive do you want it? Like for me, I just want to know like the worst case scenario, like what's the true return for my marketing department? Not my marketing, like my marketing department as a whole.
Yeah.
So like I said, there's different ways in which to do it. And a lot of businesses will say, well, I don't really want to look at just revenue. I want to look at profit. Like what's my return from a profitability standpoint based upon, you know, new customers plus returning customers and overall. So a lot of these metrics are actually fairly simple to find. It's however the business owner really looks at things. And this is one of the most important questions I think that you have to ask if you are an agency or if you're a business owner, is like, what's the metric that I care about the most? And then start from there. Like, what's my big goal? Okay. And what's the metric that I care about the most in order to get to that goal? And most of the time for us, it's profit per new customer acquired. So we know that lifetime value is, let's say, $100. They stay with, you know, the product for 4 months. Let's say the first purchase is 25, 25, 25, 25, and then they tend to drop off. You've got $100. You're making, you know, a 30% profit on that. How much can you spend to acquire a customer? In this particular hypothetical scenario is, you know, like that, those are pretty tight margins. I would have to say.
Oh, you're like, you're really pushing it at $29.
You know, this is sort of a bad example, but in that particular case, it's like, all right, I want a 10% profit margin. Well, okay. So you can basically pay $10 to acquire that customer, because that's in essence how your profit is determined based on revenue, based upon how long they stay with you and how much they actually spend with you on a monthly basis. So this is mostly just a CFO and a financial like back end calculation that I think a lot of businesses don't do.
Oh, for sure. Some of our best conversations are when that finance person come in, because when we amongst media at least talk about lifetime value, for sure gut instinct goes for those that don't have in-app tools, but like early with how we're talking about how we rely on in-app tools for lifetime value, and those is like, oh yeah, like with e-commerce, it's inside Shopify, it's inside Klaviyo, all of that information is aggregate to a level. But for those that don't have in-app tools that are delivering them that type of number, or they don't have a financial strategist that's looking at profitability per product, like we would start with what is the gut, and then we won't look at any data past 2 years. So we're not looking at any customers before 2 years ago because we assume their behavior is different. Right. Pandemic customers are not post-pandemic, what this time period customers. And so we intentionally excluded out. So we actually never assume longer than a maximum of 2 years, but then it usually comes down to like 12 to 14 months as we look at what's the average order value over 12 to 14 months. And then we calculate how many people rebought against how many people were one-time customers. So that's how we look at it. But a lot of what you're bringing in is really interesting, because for us, there's customer acquisition and conquesting, but then there's retention and life cycle marketing. So when you're looking at how the retention lifecycle marketing, because we have a marketing automation department, so it's like, hey, how do we get more? How do we monetize? How do we resurrect and reactivate people that bought once or never bought to get them into it so that I can push profitability there. So I look at profitability on the monetization side. And then with the acquisition side, you're talking about like how soon do you get profitability to a customer? I think the way I look at it is two separate departments is how much am I willing and able to pay for that customer? And then how soon can I make money from that customer? So I look at them in isolated. It's so interesting that and sophisticated how you guys are doing it in a more simplified process that when you have the John Morans on your team, you're able to be like, hey, let's look at it and factor in the marketing operation costs. Because I remove our marketing operation costs. I put that into their cost of goods sold. So I'm just like, oh, it's so interesting how differently we approach this.
Yeah, I mean, I look at, for us, it's very specific. Like cost of goods sold is delivery on product.
Mm-hmm.
So cost of goods sold is very, very specific in the industry space. Like at least, how our finance team has always looked at things. It's who do we need to hire in order to fulfill on our services? That does not include the marketing department does not fulfill on our services. So they are not included in cost of goods sold. They're under selling general administrative, which included in that is marketing. So sales doesn't help deliver on, the delivery of the product. So it's not a cost of goods sold. Like they sell and then they get out of the way. Like they reinsert themselves when they need to be, administrative costs. Like we have like softwares and all this stuff that I'm sure you guys use. Like those are administrative costs. We have accounting costs. We have legal costs. We have all these other sorts of things. And then we've got a marketing department itself. And the marketing department is where we measure our MER, our marketing efficiency ratio, based upon how many clients come in and based upon how many leads. And then really it's customers. And then once we bring in a customer, we know what that customer is worth based upon historical values. So you can break it up in a lot of different ways. I think in an e-commerce store, it's much simpler.
Yes.
It's like, it's like we had a client, I think John might have talked about this one. They're like, well, we're selling all these products to start and we're not making any money on it. And so we went through like almost line by line by line, all their individual products and said, well, okay, well, which ones are the most profitable? Which have the combination of most profit and popular? And what we found is that they're most profitable and maybe not the most popular, but pretty popular products were on like page 2 or 3 of where they were directing their advertising.
Oh,
their collection pages. So we're like, well, let's put your most profitable products up first. That way, if we keep the same new cost to acquire a customer, now like we've changed the dynamic. And this was a huge difference between what they were previously selling first, what we're now selling. And this is a company that has, I don't even know the exact number of SKUs that they have. It's probably like 100 plus, maybe a couple of hundred. The point is like just looking at that unto itself might be a game changer for your business. Like the idea of selling, hey, I'm going to sell one of my more popular products at what I know is the best profit margin and sell that first. Well, all of a sudden, you just changed the game from selling another popular product, but that has a infinitesimal or small profit margin. And we sort of changed their, I think it was like an $800 a day loss into an immediate gain. All right. So we're going to summarize this. There is, like I said, there's an entire article on this. There's an entire video on all of these things, how to calculate lifetime value and how to factor in profit and figure out how much you can pay to acquire a customer, which is NCAC, which is new cost to acquire a customer. So back to the article and the ROAS comparison. And what, John's actually quoted in this article, and one of the things that he talks about is that ROAS has been the benchmark for the majority of agencies, business owners, independent marketers, and freelancers for a very, very long time, which is fine. We certainly have done it. The bad part is it doesn't take into consideration the difference between traffic, new existing customers, because ROAS is typically blended, unless you're really able to separate out cold traffic with returning, which is much harder to do now with lack of visibility and lack of, some, privacy issues. But there's a lot of different reasons for it. Plus omni-channel traffic, which we're doing a fair amount with, overlap between those channels, and also things like, organic and email, which if somebody sees a Facebook ad, but you just send an email out and they buy from you, Facebook is going to take credit for that. They're just going to. So this is one of the reasons why, and that's going to add to your ROAS on Meta, and it will diminish potentially the data that you have on that particular broadcast email that actually brought in new customers. So a lot of these apps, a lot of these advertising platforms are trying to take credit for in areas where they should not be taking credit for any of the work that you're doing in other areas of your business. And that's why we feel that in-app ROAS now is more of an outdated metric as opposed to some of these other metrics that are mentioned in this article. Thoughts, comments?
I would one say in that where that in-app comes into, just as like a little creep beyond the ad networks, is a lot of service providers, and like this is what we found with Attentive, when they're doing like credit attribution, we have found SMS with Attentive to be defaulted to like 28 days. I don't know if they've changed it. The only way to change the attribution for an SMS was to have the Attentive team physically go in and make the changes themselves. But it's everyone is trying to get their hand into it, and then you're looking at an incomplete picture when everyone is sharing the same slice of pie.
So you see this particularly with SMS. Like SMS is obviously bottom of funnel. How do you measure the effectiveness of your SMS and your email campaigns then?
So for SMS and email campaigns, we limit that window to 4 hours, maximum 2 days. It just depends on how much credit they want to do. I recommend 4 hours. If someone's not going to make a decision with the SMS in 4 hours, they're going to be influenced by a different element. But the success of an SMS campaign, honestly, you can look at the high level numbers of when someone made the immediate purchase from it, but we actually look at the increased success of the marketing automation campaign. So this campaign, this email that went out, and then the supportive SMS revenue that was driven, the incremental revenue, is how we know the real success of an SMS if we're pushing the same message on multiple platforms. So that incremental revenue that we would not have acquired otherwise is at least how we look at it. But it's definitely a looking at when you have all these different places, right? Different ad networks, different channels that you're driving revenue, so SMS or email, and you're looking at all the revenue that was yielded against, for us at least, all the advertising spend, not cost of sending the messages, not cost of all those pieces. Then we can say, cool, we spent $26,000, we yielded $85,000 in sales, of which 14% had complete and new attribution from SMS because it was within the 4-hour time frame.
Interesting. But those people that were email and or SMS buyers came from somewhere at the top of the funnel. How do you attribute the success to those platforms?
Good question. So those, depending on the platform, they have a different window. So this looks at like at a quarterly or 6-month type of report. So when someone comes in from an ad platform, from a social platform, they have 14 days for full credit, right? And what's really cool is Meta's starting to roll out like similar to how Google does, which is a percentage of revenue. So they're starting to push that in to try to paint a more even picture. But from it, if someone doesn't buy within 14 days from social, we know that's in the life cycle and retention aspect. If someone doesn't buy within 5 days of search, then the email team, or depending on if we're providing only as a service, we as an email provider, we have sometimes made deals with clients where we get a bonus based off of new sales, and we get a percentage of that sale for anyone that's been in the ecosystem for longer than 31 days. If they're new to the ecosystem within 30 days, we count that within their marketing automations. And then anyone that's been in longer for 30 days, never bought, because we'll look at new, just a subscriber, new, bought only once, and then has bought more than once. I know we're like overlapping things, but at least that's how we look at that aspect. Like email gets credit, fair game, for anything that's been in the ecosystem for 31 more days.
And how do you measure that? Like where you actually, sorry, Kevin, we've got to make sure that we have like separation. We can't like talk over each other here. Kevin. And how do you make that determination and how do you measure it? Is that within Klaviyo in this particular case? Is it within like where do you show that the effectiveness? Oh, this SMS campaign came from new customers or it came from returning customers, and this is the revenue that's apportioned to each sort of individual segment.
So a lot of the ESPs will have that, and I like strongly recommend if you're using an isolated email service provider from an SMS provider, like why you should have them integrated so that you're looking at one. Otherwise, you cannot report on this information. So a lot of ESPs will have that native to it. Where this works really, really well, where we will do rev share, is in a sales team environment. So when we know the sales team can look at what was the original source of that lead, that will filter into where do we put more budget towards, because they'll look at, okay, all the sales that were closed today, 10% were tagged with Facebook, 30% were tagged with search. Obviously, the ones that didn't have tag, we just lump into organic or social. So we'll look at those pieces so that they can determine marketing budget. But when we're looking at sales at the end of the day, we'll get from the head of sales how many sales took place in the last month. And then we will look at those individual sales, because we're going to get a piece of that revenue if we surpass expectations of what email should perform. So in excess of, say, we're assuming that email is going to generate 50 new booked calls or 700 new bookings per month. Anything in excess of that comes from customers outside of that 30-day window, we get to charge a bonus on top of. So it does require some manual pieces. I recognize that. I'm sure there's an efficient way of doing that with Make or Zapier, but that's at least the current process that we do it.
So at least you're doing it. Like you're figuring out a way, because you know your metrics. You are actually separating stuff out here. You're not mashing it all together. You're not taking credit for the stuff that would have come in anyway. I mean, because you're basically, in this particular case, you are compensated above a certain baseline of sales. So you've already benchmarked, all right, we're going to get this much in here. Everything above that is new stuff, and that's attributed back to us.
And we're able to do that. Like that's when, like, in specific scenarios where we know that there's a sales team connected behind it, we know they know their numbers, we know that they're looking for the efficiency in their marketing. So that's essentially where, in those cases, we say Mongoose Unleashed, where we aren't going to limit ourselves or restrict ourselves to scope of, oh, we only provide this many deliverables, because if we know that we do an extra 4 campaigns and it doesn't dilute the list, or if we introduce more automations and it doesn't damage any of the sending reputation, if that can help lift towards the business owner's main goals, then we're going to institute it on our labor costs for the potential return that we anticipate with it yielding.
So I mean, in a way, I mean, this is obviously in a isolated case. I mean, we've got cases where, different platforms or even different segments of platforms are taking an inordinate amount of credit for the last click sale, when in fact it's actually, it's like you're doing it sort of in a very different way with this customer, which is great. But you're really like, we're singing out of the same hymnal as one of my old bosses used to say. Like, for example, we just recently had it was a YouTube and Performance Max campaign where Google Performance Max was showing a 631% increase in ROAS, whereas the YouTube campaign saw a 22% decrease. Or, sorry, scratch that, Kevin. Had only a 22% increase. So at first glance, you're like, well, just ramp up the Performance Max. The problem is that Performance Max wants to take credit for everything. And it was taking credit for all the stuff that the YouTube campaign was doing, because nobody clicks on a YouTube ad. It's like TV, right? Unless you actually do have, the QR code. I used to call them UPC codes here on the podcast all the time. Unless you have like the QR code ads, like there's really it's very hard to measure the effectiveness of your YouTube ads. So the client was like, well, YouTube obviously isn't carrying the day. So let's decrease spend there and just ramp up on the Google Performance Max. Point is the YouTube was carrying all of that Performance Max, because all Performance Max was doing was just taking the warm traffic that was coming from YouTube, getting that last click attribution and saying, hey, look at me. I'm the one who's actually acquiring new customers. When we broke it down, because YouTube doesn't have great attribution, we found that Performance Max was an equal portion of new customers as well as returning customers. But as soon as we decreased the YouTube spend, we saw an increase in returning customers and a decrease in new customers. So the point is like, you have to look at your numbers a little bit. You have to look at your numbers more than just what the app tells you. And I think what you're talking about here is a great scenario where you're not even looking at the app. You're looking at like, all right, and plus you're also figuring out, okay, what's the goal of this individual organization? This organization is like, we hired Mongoose Media to get above a certain level of sales that we know is already coming in. We're paying you on incremental, or paying you to do that by acquiring new customers at the top and then converting them at the very bottom through SMS and email. And there's attribution softwares that do this independently of this, but obviously there's ways in which you can do it in app, and the email providers.
Yeah, for us, it just continues to go towards your scenario of like a battleship that's being turned so aggressively, and how hard it takes it to go is, as I said in the beginning, what are they actually looking for? And how do you measure success? By looking at numbers that are available from different avenues. And I think what's interesting is not all brands have a CFO, or not all brands have like a head of sales who's like tracking and providing feedback on marketing spend dictation. Like in that use case, you said, okay, pause down YouTube, push up Performance Max. But from the sales component, potentially, Performance Max doesn't allow UTM parameters, which is annoying, but potentially there's some way that it's been tracked. Let's say it's your QR codes, or you said PPC codes.
I used to say UPC.
Okay, UPC.
Like the things that you use in the grocery store.
Oh my gosh, I was like, isn't that related to like box tops? Like, didn't I send that in with my school as a kid? Like, I'd cut off the cereal, like, to see the UPC
That's it.
number.
QR codes.
So if like when you have a team, or you have a VA, or you have a business owner that's able to look at those numbers, like it's looking at the financials, it's looking at the advertising spend, but then it's also looking at from like the sales side of like how many are actually talking. Because I will say, like, one small thing that is better for any agency owners that are listening to this, or like directors of marketing, like when you are taking out of in-plat numbers, you're able to hold your clients and hold your sales teams accountable to better performance. Because it's not fair to say to someone, oh, the quality is bad, when you're looking at like none of these were contacted, or to argue that you're not finding me the right audience when the audience has delivered to you everything that you need to know about them. So when you're looking at the efficiency, it allows you to almost scope creep a bit of what you're providing in services to be a part of the conversation the business owner wants to be had versus, oh, I'm competing and I have to take credit. So, I mean, everything that you guys are saying, and especially like this article, like it's really like a great introduction. And I know it's hard for change management, but from our bigger clients, like they're shifting this, and it's really important for anyone that's listening that's not implementing the higher viewpoint, why you need to start, because the train's already moving or the boat's already moving.
The battleship is already turning starboard. I don't even know which side that is, left or right, but it turns more slowly.
Right. Port is left, because port has 4 letters and so does the word left. That's how I remembered it.
I never knew that. See what I'm learning here on Perpetual Traffic? I don't own a boat. I know people that own boats, and that's actually the best way of operating as far as I'm concerned. I don't even though I live like on near the ocean, we will never get a boat. Anyway, setting that aside, analogies aside, we're trying to move a battleship here. We're trying to change, and in all of the things that you've discussed here, you've never once mentioned in-app metrics. It's all about what's on the back end. And we'll leave links for other shows that we've talked about. The traffic that was being sent didn't even matter. What was really mattering most was, are the leads being followed up with? The director of marketing or the director of sales says, hey, your marketing department isn't giving us any good leads. And then we go through HubSpot and we realize, oh, this one hasn't been contacted. This one hasn't been contacted. This is a qualified lead. This is a qualified lead. And then it all of a sudden, you hold your salespeople accountable. That doesn't have anything to do with how much ROAS you have in your Meta ad platform or how much you have in your Google platform. It's about how much you're actually moving your business forward. I love your example as well. So these are things that we're going to be talking about. This is going to be a theme I think we've only scratched the surface on here, which we're going to get into more and more as we go along here on Perpetual Traffic, especially with you, with different types of examples, which I think is super cool because you guys have a very different customer base than we do here at Tier 11. So it's great to have that expertise. So let's make sure that we keep the conversation going over on Telegram. That is perpetualtraffic.com/Telegram. Definitely get involved over there. Got a lot of engagement happening. And, just to see Lauren in a basement at a mastermind, you definitely want to go to our YouTube channel, perpetualtraffic.com/YouTube, just to see that. Maybe Kevin will throw in some shots of your boots. And wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure that you subscribe and leave a rating. We really do appreciate that. So on behalf of my awesome co-host, Lauren Petrullo.
Ciao.
Until next show, see ya.